Chapter 18. Little John's Trick. It is high time that Robin Hood was brought to justice. As the Sheriff of Nottingham looked out from a window towards Sherwood Forest, the thoughts that were so often in his mind came to the surface. Not far away in Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood was thinking of the Sheriff of Nottingham. It is high time the Sheriff was made uncomfortable, he told himself. He strolled around his camp, but he soon dismissed the Sheriff from his mind when the inviting smells of breakfast were wafted towards him on the breeze. The two men were forever plotting against each other. The Sheriff was eager to bring the outlaw to the gallows. Robin Hood was constantly playing tricks on him, for the outlaw knew the hatred that the Sheriff had for him and his band. When, therefore, Little John told Robin that he had thought of a new trick to play on the Sheriff, Robin was keen to hear about it. "What is it all about?" he asked. "It is my own scheme, master," replied Little John. "I would rather like to try it before I tell you about it." Robin did not press his faithful servant. He knew that Little John would tell him when necessary all about his plan. But he was surprised indeed when he woke the following morning to be told that Little John was missing from the camp. The giant had arisen early and made his way to the castle of Sir Richard of Lee. "Good Sir Richard," said Little John when he was shown into the knight's room, "I have tired of life in the greenwood. I would like to join your service as one of your soldiers." There was something in the way that Little John spoke that caused Sir Richard to doubt the genuineness of the outlaw's request. It was as if Little John had something up his sleeve. However, the good knight was pleased to have a man of such strength among his soldiers, and he allowed him to stay. Little John became a popular man among the other guards at the castle. In less than a month he had become well known as the finest archer in Sir Richard's service. It was not surprising, therefore, that when some sports were to be held in Nottingham, Little John was the first to be chosen among Richard's soldiers as a contestant. "The man seems very eager to enter the shooting match," mused Sir Richard to himself. "I somehow feel that Little John has a secret reason for being in my service." Dressed in scarlet livery, Sir Richard's archers, with Little John at their head, marched into Nottingham on the day of the sports, ready to try their skill in the shooting match. It would have horrified the townsfolk of the city if they had known that the giant, who was soon outclassing everybody with his marvellous feats with the bow and arrow, was in fact one of Robin Hood's outlaws. The Sheriff of Nottingham was amazed at Little John's skill, and he was excited when the time came for the presentation of prizes. There was no doubt about the winner. "You have a fine aim," the Sheriff congratulated him as he gave the prize to Little John. "I could do with you in my service. How does it appeal to you?" "I should like that very much, sire," said Little John eagerly. "What is your name?" asked the Sheriff. "Reynold Greenleaf," replied Little John. It was the only name that came to his mind. Agreements were made between Sir Richard and the sheriff for the transfer of Little John's service from the knight to the sheriff. Sir Richard was unwilling to allow his giant servant to serve under the sheriff, but he caught the twinkle of Little John's eye, and guessed that this had been the outlaw's plan from the very beginning. It was all clear to him now, and he gave his permission for the transfer to take place. "I will double your present wage, Reynold Greenleaf," said the sheriff. "You will be one of my archers, a high honour for any man. I will clothe you and find you lodgings and food." So Little John entered the sheriff's service, and for a little while all went well. But Little John was only awaiting an opportunity. He would strike at just the right moment. He discovered that the sheriff was a mean man to his servants, for few of them received their wages at the proper time. Their food was poor, and Little John remembered hungrily the great feasts he had enjoyed in Sherwood Forest. How he longed to rejoin Robin Hood and his merry men. "Reynold Greenleaf," called the sheriff one day, "I am going to a distant town with some of my men. You shall stay in charge of my castle until I return." "Very good, sire," said Little John. The steward who had been left to feed the remaining guards was a lazy man. He troubled little about the cooking, and he didn't offer Little John anything to eat at all. On the day after the sheriff had left, Little John entered the kitchen and saw the steward idly sleeping in a chair. "I haven't had a bite to eat," said he. "Food I must have, Sir Steward, and I intend to have it now." The steward awoke suddenly. "Eh?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "I want some food," growled Little John. "Then get it," retorted the surly steward. Little John made a grab at the steward, who fled towards the door. The outlaw sprang after him and knocked him down. The steward did not move after that. Little John helped himself to a fine meal. "What's been going on here?" The demand came from the doorway. Little John glanced slowly round. Leaning against the doorpost was the burly figure of the cook. "I felt hungry," said Little John in a matter-of-fact tone. "The steward told me to get my own food, so I did." "What is a steward doing on the floor?" "Oh, he kept getting in my way," laughed Little John. The cook took down a large staff from the wall and set about his new servant. He guessed what had happened. The greedy man had knocked out the steward and had stolen some food. Little John saw the cook grab the staff. He too found one, and they went for each other, giving blow for blow. After half an hour they both paused for rest. "You're a strong fellow," said Little John, "and brave as well." "You're not so helpless yourself," returned the cook. "If you can shoot as well, why not come with me and join Robin Hood and his merry men?" suggested Little John. "And who are you that you can make such an offer?" asked the cook curiously. "Men call me Little John," was the reply. He told the cook how he had become one of the sheriff's archers. The cook laughed at the joke. "I'll go with you," he decided. "The life would appeal to me, but we must go at once before the steward here wakes up." "Yes," agreed Little John, "but we can't go empty-handed. The sheriff owes me some wages." "He owes me some too," said the cook. "Then let's pay ourselves and charge the sheriff interest," laughed the outlaw. They strode to the sheriff's private room and broke open his desks and drawers. They gathered together a great bag of gold and took all the sheriff's silver dishes. These they crammed into 2 sacks. "Robin Hood will have his dinner in style today," chuckled Little John, as the two made their way through the forest. At length they came in sight of the outlaws' camp deep in the greenwood. The merry men were seated round their campfires. "Why, look who's here!" gasped Robin, springing to his feet as his old friend returned. The 2 men staggered towards Robin with their loaded sacks over their shoulders. "Hello, master," called Little John. "What are you doing in the sheriff's colours?" asked Robin. "Oh, I'm one of the sheriff's men. At least I was until a short time ago." Robin laughed heartily when he had heard the old story. "When the sheriff returns he will be in such a rage as to shake the city of Nottingham," laughed the outlaw leader. "Something tells me that we shall have a visit from him before long." Robin was right. End of chapter 18.